Welcome into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness for a Sunday. I am Tim Dennis, and for Dave Schrader, who is slowly making his way back from Romania. He's settling back into American life after being over in Eastern Europe for 10 days. He'll be back tomorrow on I almost said Beyond the Desert. My shows are all mixed up after being on Midnight in the Desert all week, but he'll be back on Midnight in the Desert tomorrow. Be sure to tune in on midnightinthedesert.com to listen to it live. Wherever you are, here in the Twin Cities in Central Time, it's on 11 to 2 at night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Time, it's midnight to 3 a.m. And then, of course, you do the math because my brain is shot from working all week. But I had a great week on Midnight in the Desert. I want to thank everybody for listening, whether you listened on the archives or if you listened live to Midnight in the Desert. I'm looking forward to doing it again. It was a great week, and I appreciate everyone who tuned in and listened to Midnight in the Desert. And I'm looking forward, like I said, I'm looking forward to doing it again, and had a great time. And let's do it again, shall we? But like I said, Dave will be in for Midnight in the Desert tomorrow, and he'll be joining us next weekend here on Beyond the Darkness. Had a great time with Supernatural News yesterday as well, and we have a great show today. Let's jump into it right away. I'm excited because this next couple is a team of paranormal investigators that have done the rounds on television. They've been on some of your favorite shows like Ghost Adventures, Paranormal Witness, Haunted Case Files, but we want to talk to, and Aftershocks as well, but we want to talk to them a little bit today about their stories and their ghost stories and their paranormal investigations. And we also want to talk to them a little bit about how they came into the paranormal and some of their stories as well. They have some very interesting personal stories that I want to talk to them about. And I kind of want to relate their experience to one of my own experiences that I've kind of fleshed out here on the show, too, because Jay has an interesting personal experience that I want to kind of tie to my own somewhere here in the program and get some answers, too. Give you a little bit of background on Jay and Marie Yates, our guests here today. Although they have been on television, they're not limited to television alone. They regularly appear at conventions, expos, festivals, and events. They recently appeared with Dave at an event as well. In addition, they both host their very own guest investigator programs, which allow others to experience ghost hunting and trade techniques, so you can see them out there on the road as well. Furthermore, they do ghost talks at several advanced screenings of paranormal-related movies as opening acts. They have a wide array of things they do. They have their own paranormal investigative team as well, Crossing Over Paranormal Society, the Cops Crew. You can check out their website, yatesfamilyhaunting.com, and you can see videos of some of their investigations as well. Let's welcome in right now to Beyond the Darkness, Jay and Marie Yates. Welcome, Yateses.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
Well, absolutely a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have both of you here as well. Let's start basically with backgrounds, and I want to start with and I'll mention too here. We're going to have to let Marie go here in about half an hour. Because duty calls, Marie. We all have regular jobs as well. We don't all get rich off this stuff. That's a given.
Paranormal does not get you rich.
That's right. So let's start with you, Marie. I want to get first of all your background in the paranormal and your first paranormal experience and how you came about the paranormal.
Well, technically, I did not become into the paranormal scene until I actually met my husband.
Oh, okay.
I will honestly say, growing up, I grew up in a very Baptist home, and it was very strict. I didn't hear anything about spirits, ghosts, or anything about the unknown at all. it was something that was just kept from us. And if you did talk about it, it was the devil. So to be honest with you, just something, the only kind of ghost I ever seen was Casper the Friendly Ghost on TV. That's the only one I even knew of. I actually met my husband now, Jay, through my cousin. And when we started dating, he started little by little telling me about his life and a lot of experiences that he goes through on a daily basis. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it was so odd because we just started dating and he was telling me all these stories. But every time he told me one of his experiences with the paranormal, it was like you could totally say, oh, he's actually telling the truth. Like normal people, to be honest with you, anybody else would have said that probably to me, I probably would have ran and said, okay, they're liars. I mean, you're not telling the truth. You're crazy. But I don't know. It's something in his eyes. I knew he was speaking the truth of his experiences and stuff like that. His parents even told me about a lot of the different experiences Jay had. His grandmother, his everything, told me a lot when we got together and everything. So it just brought me closer into knowing a little bit about him. And then I actually have an autistic son from a previous marriage. And my autistic son always, from the age of, I think it was like 3 years old, always talked to other people. I just assumed because he was autistic and had mental illness, it was that. I never, imaginary friends. He'd always tell me things are going to hurt me or going to hurt this. I mean, he always warned me about things that was really weird. I always just assumed, I just brushed it off as, autistic and all that kind of stuff. Well, when I started dating Jay, Jay and my son bonded really very fast and very and I actually started getting jealous because my son never really wanted to be around me. He wanted to be around Jay. A lot of it had to do with is Jay actually was seeing the exact same things my son was seeing. So for me to actually get more acquainted with everything, I started learning more about the paranormal. So that's what started me into it.
So the jealousy you started.
I did. I think it was jealousy. I mean, because my son was never wanting to be around me. It was like, okay. So to be honest with you, I started, doing more research in it. I would ask Jay a lot more questions in depth and of his, his experiences and stuff. Later on, we finally did decide to move in together. We bought a home together, and we were outside. And Jay just did a bonfire for us, and we were sitting out there. It was just me and Jay. I just put the kids to bed, came out there.
This was an arranged conversation because I wanted you to know the whole story before you finally said I do.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that he was going to ask me to marry him. So he wanted all his, things that he's gone through. He wanted to make sure I knew everything. So he started like a little bonfire. We were sitting out there, and he was telling me all these stories. And most women, I would honestly say, with his stories, probably would have ran. And I don't.
Well, that explains why the other two engagements didn't work out so well.
Me, I stayed. I guess I have thicker skin, I guess. But I was like, okay. And I mean, to be honest with you, if you ever do get to meet my husband, I mean, like when he is speaking, I mean, it's just, he's so intent about it. And it's like, you can totally say whatever he's saying is the truth. And that's what I was. I was so, inspired. And
or I'm absolutely insane.
Oh, you could be insane. And then we were just sitting there. All of a sudden, I wanted to go and check on the children because I was just like, I might have been feeling a little bit creeped out a little bit because of some of the stories. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go check on the children. And I got up, heading into the house. At the same time I was heading to the house, this weird-looking creature that looked like I don't even know how to explain him, a gargoyle. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to explain him. A dragon-looking, ugly creature that was, full, saying there, full body. It was just the eyes was so black that I couldn't even explain the blackness of it. I mean, it was like if I kept looking at his eyes, I felt like I was going to fall in and not get out. I mean, it was the most scariest thing I've ever seen, but it came running out of my house.
Oh my God.
I screamed. I screamed so loud. I can't believe the cops weren't actually coming to our house because how loud I screamed.
I thought you had seen like a javelina or something because you weren't used to being out in Arizona.
And that's when he came. Jay finally came, and he came when I seen the thing. The legs were probably not even an inch. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. His legs of this thing. It had legs. It had hands. It had these really weird looking ears. I mean, and the eyes are what really, is just so black. Wow. And he ran into like this gated area that we have, and it just like disappeared. At the same time he did that, the lights around our house started dimming lower, and then all of a sudden got really bright, and then went down again, and it kept doing that. Exploded, right? Yeah, and then as soon as I think it did it like 2 or 3 times, and then all of a sudden it just blew. And Jay came around at that time, and I'm like, okay, if you guys have some really crazy creatures, and I'm not living here in the state of Arizona anymore, or what did I just see? I mean, I freaked out so bad. Jay had to like literally calm me down. I mean, it was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, oh my God. And Jay took me over back to the bonfire after I checked on the kids, and they were sound asleep. I mean, they had no idea what was going on. So I went back over there, and Jay kind of calmed me down. While we were sitting there, all of a sudden, Jay has like a little I don't know what you want to call it, man house, little in the back area.
I have my own private.
Yeah, he had his own little private area. And then,
it even had a urinal.
Yeah,
really?
It did. And there's a refrigerator with a freezer on the top. Well, in this refrigerator, I will honestly say, is I hated opening it because it was so hard to open. It was like I was stuck really good. All of a sudden, we're sitting there, all of a sudden the freezer flies open and meat just gets thrown at us. And I'm like, it was
like something out of a movie.
Yeah, it was the most, I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, and honestly, I will tell you, probably for a couple seconds, I thought about not even being with this gentleman for a little bit, because I've never seen that I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, okay. And I'm the type that always tries to debunk everything. I mean, I will honestly, till this day, I always say it's something else, scientific. I always try to push it that way. And I'm like, okay, we'll put the meat back in there. Something came loose. It just popped open. And I was like, so I made sure it was tight. And I'm like trying to open the freezer again. I'm like, okay, well, it's tight. I barely can open it. So we go sit back down, and it does it again. This time the meat actually even got further. So usually when it pops open, you think the meat would just fall out and land right there in front of the freezer.
Right.
No, it was like trying to reach us. So I'm like, okay. I think I was done at that time with Jay's talk.
The spirit of the
and I was like, you're done. Don't tell me no more. And I was like, I was done at that time. So it took me quite a while before I would actually listen to Jay's stories again.
I don't blame you. Well, let me ask you this, Marie. So, and I want to backtrack a little bit here. So you're getting stories from Jay's parents, and he's told you these stories, and you're getting these, you would think they would be red flags that are being thrown up here. And to say red flags, I think I'm being a little conservative when I say red flags. Yet, I guess love is a huge addictive substance. We could throw that in there. Besides,
otherwise, that was pretty awesome, though.
Yeah, and besides Jay being an awesome guy and that whole love thing, what is it that keeps you around? I mean, you've got these things that are happening around you, but what is it that keeps you around? Is there a little bit of intrigue there? Is there morbid curiosity? What is it that keeps Marie around to say?
I used to think it was because Jay fell in love with my children before he fell in love with me. And that's very hard as a single mom to find something like that.
Okay.
So I always said it was that.
I'll take the demons as long as somebody loves my children just as much as me. So I'm like, okay, that's what it is. But to be honest with you, after so many years, you sold your soul to the supernatural.
I know, I did. But after that, I realized throughout the years of me and Jay talking, and we just telling each other stories about our past and everything. When I was a young child, I was a very spirited child, and I always did things that my parents told me not to do.
Okay.
And I always wanted to go into the deeper, darker areas, but I never knew, until we talked about it, the locations I would go into is abandoned houses that people said that there had ghosts and all that kind of stuff. And I would go in there and play dollhouse in there and play.
I just awoken the beast with it. That's all it was.
I used to go to this bridge. It's called the Farmer's Bridge. Growing up, it was like my spot where I would go to think.
Okay.
It's the weirdest thing, but
it's where a farmer hung himself.
Yeah, it was a farmer hung himself.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, okay. Well, I guess it was there. I think due to my, what my beliefs were with my parents and what I grew up with, it sort of just kept it in the background.
Okay. because I find that interesting, especially having children. And, you know, we've crossed this bridge a few times on the show with the whole, I guess, weighing the argument. It's the right. Man I love versus putting my children in the way of potential harm. And is that harm real or imagined? And I guess in your mind, did you perceive that harm as real or imagined at the time, Marie?
To be honest with you, at the beginning, just because my autistic son was so bonded with Jay and what he was seeing, Jay was seeing, I knew there was something there, but I didn't know if it was, imaginary, and not if it was real or not. Mm-hmm. It took me a couple years to believe, that, yeah, it was real. Okay. But at first, I don't believe.
Well, Stephen started talking because he was nonverbal for a while.
Yeah.
And he actually, that's when he started actually speaking a lot more, is during these conversations of hauntings. But yeah.
A lot of people ask, how are you able to put I will honestly say, my autistic son actually is better now, to be honest with you, after he's open with the paranormal. He can actually see things and be like, okay, leave me alone, and just knows how to deal with it now. Thanks to, honestly, Jay and myself actually doing the research and everything like that. I will actually say Ghost Adventures actually assisted a lot, too.
Yeah, actually, Stephen was on Ghost Adventures Aftershock.
Yeah, they actually reached out and got somebody come in and assist our son. And it really did help us, try to get more in depth of his condition and, what he was going through and everything and how we can help him. Our youngest son, Jay, and I have a younger son now. But I will honestly say, I think one thing I've always done with my son, and everybody's asked, well, how do you keep it away from your son? I demand whatever it is or anything that's the unknown to stay away from my son. And to be honest with you, until our son was about 15, he really, nothing messed with him. Every night before my son went to bed, I said a prayer and I demanded whatever's in our house or around Jay or around me, whatever we do, you're not allowed to mess with my son. And my son was actually okay with it. He's now 17 years old, and
he's got the bug.
He has the bug. He wants to take mom and dad's business, and mom and dad need to retire now.
Well, you go wow. First. This ain't gonna pay you too good.
You're not that old. How does he think that you guys are washed up and ready for a home, or what? Why the retirement thing?
Next year, yeah.
That's what he thinks. Yep. As soon as he graduates, he thinks mom and dad are too old, and he has to take over.
Jeez,
I guess I don't know.
The wonders of youth. I guess I would ask you this, Marie. So you've said that even when he was younger, your oldest son, you looking back, especially as I guess a skeptical believer, you really didn't see any manifestation of any ghostly activity around him. So there other than just him speaking to spirits. So you didn't see anything moving or anything like that, or
not.
I don't think you even paid attention to it.
I did. Well, I never seen anything. I don't think I gave it the time or day, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And I think that's one thing a lot of people need to realize about the paranormal. If you really don't give it the time of day, it's almost like when you're a little child. You actually, when you're younger, the world teaches you. You believe in the Easter Bunny, you believe in Santa, you believe in all that kind of stuff. You have that child belief faith. When you grow up, you start losing all that faith, and you don't believe in nothing. You sort of block it away and whatever.
Pretty much all kids are born.
Yeah, and I think, when you get into the paranormal and you actually see it, I think you start opening that faith a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying, believe in the Easter Bunny and all that kind of stuff, but you believe there is something out there. And the more you dabble yourself into it, I think the more you start actually seeing things. So, to be honest with you, no, I didn't see anything that my son hurt. I didn't hear anything. I don't believe I started
talking to the bathtub.
Yeah, I didn't, even when he did all that kind of stuff. I will honestly say it wasn't until probably a year after Jay and I moved in together, I finally seen an object in my son's room when he was having a huge fit, and because I would get woken up nightly by him screaming, saying it won't get out of my room. It wants me to do this. It's over you and Dad. It's going to kill you guys. And he would scream nightly. But at that time, I remember he had this little, I forget what it's called. It's like an antique thing, and it opens up. It's like a wood box. And it opened, and it slammed shut right in front of me, and there was nobody there. And that was the first time I ever seen anything like that actually moved.
Very interesting. I want to throw a concept at you for a second, because you used a phrase, and I want to kind of turn it on its ear for a second here with you. And I want to throw this at you, Marie, but then I want to also throw it at Jay, because I see a dynamic here, and I guess I'm kind of convoluting the question, but I want to throw the concept out here. You used the word mental illness when you talked about autism, but I also have heard autism used as the next evolution in human evolution, as a different side of a new side of the human spectrum. And I'll tell you this much, and I've never really revealed this about my own family, but my youngest nephew is mildly autistic. And what's interesting about him is that he's highly intelligent. He's very intelligent, but he's also highly insightful. And he sees things that a lot of other people don't see, and that people don't get. He actually got chided by an instructor who was giving him a test, in that they asked him they held an object up. They were doing some preschool testing with him. They held an object up in front of him and said, "What's this?" And he said, "Well, he described, instead of saying, "What is this?" instead of saying it's a car, he described what type of car it was, the model and the type of car it was. And they said, instead of saying it's a 2004 Ford, they were like, "No, it's a car." And he said, "No, it's a 2004 Ford." and for a 5-year-old to say that is unusual. He was right, but the teacher said he was wrong, because no, it's a car. But he's saying, no, it's this, and that is what it is. It's that.
Right. He was going more in depth about what it really was, and she only wanted the outside of what it was.
Right.
The layers of these kiddos that have, autism and the spectrums that they see are far more intense than we're ever going to get from any of these SLS cameras or anything. It's amazing, and I've seen it from my own son. I actually work behavioral health and my real job, and I deal with kiddos on all forms of the spectrum. And I see it a lot. I see it from my own kid. We get reached out to a lot by the paranormal community, thanks to our spot on Ghost Adventure Aftershocks, which kind of put our trials and tribulations out there for the world to see. But we've been out there, they've been able to actually help people and communicate about this, and it be more of a conversation that can be openly spoken about. But yeah, I do really believe that they have a gift. I wouldn't say that they're psychic or they're mediums, but I think that their insights, like you said, is far more detailed than where we're at.
Right.
I feel like they're the new breed of human or something. Like they're what we're going to be in the future. Right. It's more insightful and understanding of everything, energy and what that means, and it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
I almost wish at times I could look into I could see things through my nephew's eyes, because I choose to look sometimes at autism not as like a societal challenge, but more like almost like I stated a different side of the spectrum of humanity. I almost feel like being normal is almost a challenge. You almost.
I will honestly. Well, I will say one thing about my son is when I say he's autistic and he's mental illness, he has numerous things. And that's what the doctors, with several medical, doctors, and we've taken our son to so many different doctors. I mean, he's not just autistic. He actually does have mental illness with it.
Okay. Well, my apologies. I like I said, I didn't know the entire story, but it's
No, that's okay.
it's what I find intriguing too is that it seems to me that children that do have some form of autism, it seems that they do, and I through watching a few of the videos on your site, and through watching and talking to people who have dealt with autistic children, it seems that there is a pathway that's opened for some reason or another to the other side. And one of the things that I found interesting as well that I had caught through watching that video, and this is something that I wanted to talk to both of you while I had both of you here. There's something that I think it was Jay who said it. You had talked in one of the videos about that doorway being opened for certain people to the other side, and how it opened quickly, or the veil was thin, I should say, for certain people, the elderly, in particular, people who had maybe Alzheimer's. I found that fascinating.
Well, a lot of that had to do with a case that my grandmother had dementia.
Mm-hmm. Dementia,
and throughout her years of having, she probably had it. She would die probably a year and a half, I think, we finally realized. Yeah, and throughout that time, I mean, her face, not her face, but like, it's almost like Jay says, he's the one that always says it. It's like a veil is lifted down. And I will honestly say, watching my grandmother, she would always tell us, okay, I seen Grandpa today, or I seen, because a lot of her sisters passed. My grandfather, her husband, passed. And she would always tell us about these, communications and all the stuff that she talked with them and all this. So I know with a case that we had to do with my grandmother at my mother's house. So I think a lot of things do open with that veil. And I know Jay really talks about it.
The way I interpret this whole thing, and my understanding just from experience in my own life, and then investigating, locations of people who are going through it as well, is that children are fresh from heaven, and they haven't been filled, like Marie said, with life's disappointments. Right. So with that being said, they're more open to the other side. That there's not a limitation as far as their perception. And the same goes as we get older, whether we end up with dementia or Alzheimer's, or we just get older, right? Mm-hmm. I think that we're starting to cross back over. So we revert back to that childlike state to where we're more open to those things. And that sometimes when, your little 3-year-old or 4-year-old is in the corner talking to some kid named Joey, he actually might be doing that. And as for people who are older and they're talking about, talking with family members that have been passed for years and years and years, don't discredit that. Because to them, it's very real. So regardless of situations, to them, it's very real. But I really do believe in many cases, they're really communicating with these people, because, that veil has kind of thinned, as they are crossing over to the other side, if you will. We've just seen it all too much for it, there not to be some validity with it, at least. It's
just with watching all my children. I have 3 boys. I have an older son that's a little old, like a year and a half older than my autistic son. Mm-hmm. And watching him grow up, he never had any of that. None of those.
I didn't raise him.
And then my autistic son, it's just from a young age, he always had that kind of, talking to things in the corner, telling me things, came to his room. And then our younger son, to be honest with you, he never really started speaking about anything that he's seen or heard until he actually started really watching Mom and Dad on TV and thought that was really cool, and and then started wanting to be part of the team, know about it, and stuff like that. So that's when it started, I think, when he's out. I don't even know if he's actually really still had his first experience, to be honest with you.
He really has. He started out passing out flyers at the conventions we go to, or the talks that we do, to then when we were doing public ghost hunts, I remember one day we were doing the old Sunkiss factory in Mesa, and I was collecting all the equipment after the event that was in the areas that we had designated. And I heard something in another room, and it was my son, my 16-year-old son at the time, almost 17 at the time, I think. And he was sitting there, like, talking to something, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, what? I was down here, and I heard something, and I wanted to catch an EVP, and he had his recorder out on his phone. And I'm like, okay, we need to regroup and sit down and talk about this, and how, like, if you're really interested in being an investigator, we need to do this right. And since then, we've been molding him, and taking him out to, very mild cases in historical locations.
And we put protection. A lot of people know us in the field that Jay and I don't use any kind of protection. That
paranormal protection.
Paranormal
protection. Yes, okay. Thank you for clarifying.
We don't use any kind of paranormal protection.
Okay.
That's funny. But a lot of people in the field know this about us. And we actually always say we have a huge caution tape on us. I mean, don't follow what we do. We do this because we know of it. Mm-hmm. And this is what we want to do.
I feel like you're limited if everyone tries to make us do their potions and their waters and their sands and their rocks and all this shit. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can say that. It's a podcast, yeah.
Okay.
There's no FCC listening.
And that's fine. And it works for them. And I respect that 100%. And I'm glad that it works for them. And it's just for us, whether it will work or not. I was born haunted. So, I mean, I'm kind of used to it. My family's been so accustomed to it. They really don't really know any different. It's just like you grow up around it. You just kind of, it is what it is. But I feel like you limit your progress with cases. I've learned so much more on what was going on in a residential case by coming home and dealing with what was in that house that was in my house. That maybe piggybacked me on my way home because I didn't use a protection or, closed communication or whatnot. Mm-hmm. When we're on a case, and it's ongoing, I don't close that communication. When case is over with, we've learned that communication is over with and we close that out. But there's been a lot that we've learned outside of the actual case itself in our own home and our own life. We were catching EVPs as recently as 2 months ago that duplicated the exact same EVPs that we were catching in a hotel that we investigated at the Lyric Theater up in Yuma, Arizona. And we were catching the same type of EVPs in our house, in our bedroom. You know what I mean? So I was like, wow, like what's going on? Like that's crazy to know that these things can travel like that. And assuming that was that particular entity, but that's just how we.
But the difference with our son is I do have him until he understands and goes through what Jay and I have already gone through. Our son uses protection. We want him to use paranormal protection. Paranormal protection.
Yes, yeah.
Every other kind of protection.
Well, you want him to use as much protection everywhere as possible, I'm guessing.
Yes, I mean, he's 17 now and all about, I want him to wear all kinds of protection.
There shall be no grandparents before it's time.
No.
Right. Let me ask you, and let me ask Jay this question before we head to Theater of the Mind here. Let me and Jay, I want to ask you this because I have a feeling that there may be a little bit more of a deeper answer than what may be obvious here. But as you're bonding with your older son, I know it has more to do than just with your professional background, and maybe even more than just with empathy, having to do with the haunted situation. But as you're sitting down and talking with your older son, is there something more to it than just the professional background or having the talking to spirits in common that you're clicking so well with them? Was there something inside you that says, I think I know how to talk to this kid? And what was it? What was it that just clicked with you and automatically you know how to communicate with this child?
I think it started like almost immediately. I was noticing that he would be talking in the apartment that Marie lived in and in the bathroom near the toilet in the bathtub, and he'd have these long, blown-out conversations. I later had some experiences that kind of had me filled with questions. One evening, I approached him, and he explained a kid named Nicholas and a man named Snake. We found out later, a very long story short, that a guy's moniker, that's my law enforcement background coming out there, but his nickname on the street was Snake, and that there was a murder-suicide in the apartment prior to Marie living there, and he had actually drowned his son in the bathtub named Nicholas, and then he took his life. So my son was able to see that. I saw the boy, and I saw the negative energy left behind in the wake of this man named Snake. But for me, when I was witnessing this happening, Marie was just kind of like, not familiar with it because of her background. And I was much so very tuned into it. And I didn't want to immediately jump to ghosts or anything like that. And I just sat around listening to what he had to say and what the information he had to provide to me. So it definitely was out of empathy and understanding, and just us both. I felt a similarity there, a connection that I've been there before. I didn't get slapped with the autism diagnosis when I was a kid, but I was ran through the loops because I was seeing so many crazy things, supernaturally charged, that I had to get psychologically evaluated. And they all came back that, oh, he's normal. He just has a crazy imagination, And that's kind of like, I guess, I had a soft spot in my heart for that. And I wanted to help him if I could, because I didn't have anybody to really go to that understood the supernatural. I kind of had to get assured by my grandmother, who was a devout Christian, and she kind of believed in spirit. So it was kind of like, that was a little helpful for me, but it didn't shed full light on everything. And, I slowly worked with them, and it was amazing. And it scared the hell out of us, honestly. Even me, that we found out, like, legitimately there was actually a murder suicide that took place, and he picked up on that, and there would have been no way that he would have had that information.
I will honestly say one thing. I will say that similar to Jay and my son, our autistic son, is they both were like more or less like loners, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They always stuck to their self. Steven's actually real, and that's our son. Sorry, his name's Steven. He actually is very smart. I mean, beyond smart.
Overly smart.
I mean, he cracks every computer, every TV thing. He cracks all of our passwords that we try to put on everything.
Wow.
He's really smart. He knows how to get what he wants when he wants it. He knows all that. He's very smart. It's sad because the mental illness hit him too, and it sort of helped, with his anger and stuff. That's the problem where lies with him. But I will say with Jay and him both, hearing about his mom telling me about his life of growing up, that he was very independent, and he was like a loner a little bit, sort of stayed offish about other friends and stuff like that. And Stephen was the exact same.
It was really hard as a kid to like relate to other people because, from as far back as I can remember, all the way up until, August 13th of 1999, I had a near-death experience, which made it even 10 times worse. So, it was like I was always kind of like I couldn't relate to people unless they knew what I was seeing. It was hard. I saw things in a different perspective, I guess. So it was difficult to trust people is different.
Still this day, I will honestly say.
I still kind of am. Yeah.
Stephen, honestly, he's a mama's boy. Anybody that will see him, he's a mama boy. But when he wants to actually have a conversation and actually say what he's going through, it's always his dad. It's not really mom. It's only when he needs something or when he wants to be loved or something like that to mom. But usually he has conversations with dad.
Oh. Well, that's awesome that your whole family is that tight that way, and that everyone is that tight, and that you can be that tight, because the supernatural stuff really does, when you look at it in retrospect, it tears more families apart than it does bring it together. So in that, it's awesome that you can not only just come together but thrive under those circumstances. So.
Well, I will say throughout the whole many years of us being married, and we're going on 14 years of marriage, I will honestly tell you there has been a lot of times due to the paranormal and experiences and, life and everything. I will say there's been rocky moments, but I will honestly say...
We took a stand like several years ago where we were like, we're no longer going to allow the paranormal to control our lives. We reached out to the paranormal community, and really nobody wanted to really help us. And there was just like stipulations on how they wanted to help us because they felt it was demonic. Reached out to clergy. They felt as if it were a liability. They had family. They didn't want anything following them home. We were just kind of boxed out and didn't know where to go. So we just kind of took it on ourselves. And then I wouldn't say we got rid of it. That's no way in any way, shape, or form. But we learned how to live comfortably among the dead. And we learned that like emotional energies and things that you transmit into your own home play a huge role into what's happening on the other side. You invite things into your home, into your life, into your house by negativity, arguing, fighting, disagreements, negativity. Those things are all invites to darker things. And we learn the hard way, you know what I mean? And, now our trials and tribulations have become other people's testimonies as we go out and we help, families that don't know where to turn. And when other people say no, we say yes. We just agreed to a very serious case recently. We'll probably be on that residential case for 6 months. And, our care coordinator is a previous client. So when the people call us, the first person they talk to is a previous client of ours. which speaks volumes to what we're doing.
So I have a huge question here then for both of you. When you reach out to the paranormal community and you kind of get a huge amount of backlash, does that... Okay, I'm going to ask the hard question here. Do you feel then that there is a huge double standard within the paranormal community? There's the whole, reach out to us, we'll help, we'll be there, love and light, blah, blah, blah. But you get the huge kind of slap in the face when you do. Is there a bitter taste there? I mean, is there kind of a, big FU, there when you do that?
I will honestly say it was quite a few years ago. I think the paranormal community now has a little bit different now.
This is going back to like 03.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I will honestly say I did feel like somebody was like slamming doors in our face. But I will honestly say, being a paranormal investigator and going through it, I understand why. Because of some of the stuff we were dealing with, they didn't want it to come home. They knew what could happen to them. So I understood.
Plus, there wasn't that many great social there wasn't we didn't have like social media where it's easier to reach out.
Social media is like a double-edged sword.
The
amount of people that we could have reached out to were much smaller back then than they are now that people can reach out to.
Well,
one thing I will say, being on TV and being able to come, all these events and conferences and stuff, we've got to meet some amazing people. I mean, John Zaffis, Brent Wilson. I mean, those are just two of them. Dave Schrader. I mean, just talking to them, builds you every time you talk to one of them. Just because of all the stories and everything they've experienced. Countless experiences they've gone, and you're hearing them. And you're able to speak to them, and they talk to you like you're equal. You don't realize, that builds a lot of,
It helps the community.
It helps the community, and that's how a lot of it is. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of them out there that don't do that. But I will say a majority of the paranormal groups and, the ones on TV and stuff do that. I will also say Zach went out of his way to assist us with our son. And not too many people did that. He went out of his way to make sure somebody was here helping our son, even reached back out at us and found out how our son was doing and everything. So, it's just, I think the community now, I think paranormal itself is, I guess, more acceptable in the world now compared to back and then. If you brought that up, it was very, in common.
This is going back 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It is a much different environment than it was 15 years ago.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it is. It is a little bit of a different. Although, to me, it seems like we've been doing the show it'll be 13 years in January, and to me, it seems like even. I'll just throw it out there and call it what it is. It seems like that love and light attitude has always been out there for the longest amount of time that I can remember, and people have always made the offer, but it doesn't seem like people have always wanted to follow through with the offer. I'll just call it like
delivery is always the problem.
Yeah.
And it's, the people, that are in these, paranormal teams and stuff, they have regular jobs. They're doing this thing, on their free time. But sometimes, they get super busy. They have multiple cases they're doing all at once. They don't have time for evidence review. Yep. They don't have time for the client. Marie and I now, I would say more so than investigations, because investigations take a very long time. And it's a big process and everything. So we focus a lot of our energy on just like paranormal consultation is what we call it. We don't charge for it or anything. It's just when you meet us at, conventions, or you see us out, or you reach out to us through our, social media or our websites or whatever, it's us that's responding back to you. And, we, walk through what you're going through and give advice and tips that we've learned through the years. And it doesn't always mean you have to go out there and do an investigation. It's not always about catching that piece of evidence, because the reality of the situation is that if a person's had a haunted house and lived in a haunted house for, let's say, 20 years, and you go out there with your team for 6 hours, you set up all this crap all over the whole house, and you're there for 6 hours, and then you have zero results. And you say, well, hey, I was here, we did all this, we didn't catch anything. And these people are like, well, that didn't really help me out. But then on the other side of that note is that, let's say you did catch something. You go out there and you catch the Holy Grail, a full body apparition. It validates everything. The first question that client's going to ask you is, now what? And Marie and I are the now what. And a lot of these clients we serve become our friends. They become our family, and we're accessible to them at any time. and we always make ourselves available to them to talk to them and, work through, what they're going through and whatnot. Because I feel that that's far more important than trying to go out there and to catch this evidence, because the reality is you might not get that evidence. And whether they're haunted or not, they believe that they are haunted. So what can you do to help them? Obviously, it's a tough process, but for us, it seems to work really well. But again, we're out there investigating. We got multiple investigations coming up, some small, some big. But it's that consultation, that one-on-one interaction, people seem to appreciate that a lot more. And we seem to help a lot more by doing so.
So let me ask you this will be the last question before we go to Theater of the Mind. In both your opinions, and we'll start with Marie first, do you feel that there are more paranormal teams that are out there more just to catch the evidence than they are out there to help people in need? Marie, you first.
Marie actually had to go.
Oh, she had to go? Okay, Jay, go ahead. Go ahead.
What was the question again? There's more people out.
Do you think that there are more paranormal teams that are out there just to collect the evidence, maybe, or get the thrill than there are to actually help people out there?
Yeah, so I'd say that most of the time it's the thrill that most paranormal teams are searching for. They're the ones that there's more of that. It's more of like the enthusiasm of going out there to investigate. I had an excellent question at the convention I just recently appeared at, where a lady said something about, do you think it's always important to rattle the cage? And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, going out and investigating a place because it's haunted just for the sake that it's haunted, and you're really not doing anything beyond just going there so you get scared. And I said, wow, that's a really good question. But the reality is that, a lot of these investigators, they're wanting to go out there and rattle the cage. There's no substance behind it. There's no purpose. There's no meaning. There's no passion. What do you ultimately, I think we have to ask ourselves as paranormal investigators is, what are we doing this for? I feel like I'm called to do this. I felt like that from a very young age. And it just all makes sense. It fits now. But our goal really is, if we can help the dead, we will. If we can help the living, we will too. But there has to be some type of motivation behind that. And I think that is lacking seriously in the paranormal community. What do you think, Marie? Marie came back for a second.
Oh, okay.
I was came in to say goodbye. I wanted to make sure I was able to say goodbye.
Sure,
Sorry. I didn't hear the question, so I apologize.
I'll throw it to you, and it's just a real easy, quick question. And that is, I guess it's not easy, but it's a quick question. That is this: do you feel there are more paranormal teams that are out there just to collect evidence, or kind of like trophy hunters, that they're out there just to collect the evidence and show, hey, look what I got, or are they out there to do that more than they are to necessarily go out there and help families?
I do think there's quite a few teams out there, just with getting to meet so many different people, and plus social media shows a lot of it, to be honest with you. Yeah, a lot of it is for the YouTube channels. Get your own TV, be the next Zach Bagans or whatever, stuff like that. I do think a lot of them are out there to do that. I'm hoping I have more faith in our paranormal community that most of it is for the real reason. I know the reason why I got into the paranormal. We always have different opinions. To be honest with you, I'm hoping there is a little percentage. I'm hoping that, more of a bigger one that does for the right reasons. Oh, like me, I got into the paranormal to actually help my son. And understand my husband. And all that kind of stuff. That's why I got into it. And then when I realized what was happening to our home, I wanted to be able to, since we were able to kick its ass, and that, we're still living with it, but we're able to live with it and actually live normal. We wanted to assist other families, and I hope that.
Call this normal?
Yeah, well, we're not normal. We're like the Addams family, but the paranormal Addams family, But to be honest with you, I really hope that the bigger percentage of the paranormal teams are there to help. And I hope it's a very little bit amount that's actually out there for the TV. But I know there are some out there, just because you got to love social media. It tells everybody's truth.
That's right. All right. Well, with that in mind, let's take our break for Theater of the Mind. When we come back, we'll sit and visit with Jay, and we've got lots of stuff to ask Jay. He mentioned earlier in the program that he had a near-death experience. We'll talk to him about that. We'll also talk to him about the hauntings that he had gone through as a child, and we'll talk a little bit about the Cops Crew. That'll come up here in just a bit in the second half of the program. But first, it's time for this week's installment of Theater of the Mind.
Today's Theater of the Mind comes from the real experience of Billy Finley, teasing the dead. In 2009, I went along with some friends to do some, let's call it urban exploring. We lived very near the California State University campus in Camarillo, California. On campus sits the former Camarillo State Mental Hospital. It's dark, creepy, and silent. The building seems fine by day, but by night it takes on a very ominous feel. We snuck through an old window and made our way through the halls, nervously laughing from time to time as the sound of broken glass crunched beneath our feet, and the halls seemed to get darker and darker the longer you move through them. Having grown up in the area, everyone knows how haunted the hospital is reported to be. My uncle had worked security there in one of the last few years it had been open, between 1995 and 1997. He would tell us all the yells and screams would come from the empty rooms. Patients would be carrying on about things in their rooms. You know, the whole weird gambit. Well, after an hour of slinking around in the halls and narrowly avoiding campus security a few times, we decided to do one more walkthrough in small groups and work our way through the corridors. Now, just 2 of us at a time. We waited until the first group got back. Then Mike and I set out on our nocturnal adventure. Crisscrossing halls, opening doors, cabinets, and the like, hoping to have something happen. Anything. Unfortunately, it never did. As we neared the end of our walk, I turned and flipped the angry bird into the hallway and told the ghosts, "Go F yourselves, you're nothing but a bunch of wussies with a capital P. You didn't scare me." I turned to face my friends, and we had all had a good laugh. We made our way back towards the window we had entered through, and as I watched each of my friends crawl through the window, I waited my turn, tapping my foot on the ground impatiently. When it was finally my turn, I put my smarmy voice on and again called out with a smirk, "So long, you loony bastards. Nothing to see here." And then it hit me. Like a ton of bricks, halfway in and out of the window, something slammed me hard against the frame. The window hit me in the right shoulder, and I felt a blinding pain on the left side of my neck. Then a growl, then the sound of running, and a long, haunting laugh. I shoved the window open and I tumbled out. I scrambled towards my friends who were laughing and mocking my clumsy exit, and the laughter came to an abrupt stop when I removed my hand from my neck. And there, emboldened on my neck, was a bright, pronounced human bite mark. I told my friends what happened, and we took off out of that area, vowing to never go back. And I can tell you now, you couldn't pay me enough to go back in there in the safety of light or under cover of the night. That place really bites.
Beyond the darkness.
Welcome back to the second half of the Sunday edition of Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennis, filling in for Dave Schrader. Jay Yates is with us here on the second half, and we are talking about not only the Cops crew, but we're talking about now we're focusing in on Jay. And welcome back, Jay. We're going to focus in a little bit about you here on the second half of the program. In the first half, we talked more about yourself and your wife, Marie, and about a little bit about the family and the family business, so to speak, in paranormal investigation. I want to get down to your background and some of the more interesting tidbits about growing up. You had grown up haunted. I want to get into that part first. Sure. And I want to get into the first time you actually saw something or noticed something of the paranormal. Describe to me the first time you saw something of the paranormal. What did you notice? When was it? How did it come about?
Yeah, this goes back like a long time ago. I mean, as far back as I can remember, I must have been probably about 4, I want to say, that I can remember. I started seeing a shadow figure appearing in my room. And it would appear in the daytime. It would appear in the nighttime. It would be more prominent during the nighttime that I would see this. It wouldn't say anything. It wouldn't move. It didn't have facial features. It was just simply a large masculine shadow figure, if you will. It was completely blacked out. So shadow, I guess, is kind of understating exactly what it was. I call it shadow just because of the darkness. I would see this, and it would terrify me, and I would oftentimes I'd be playing with my He-Man or something like that in my bedroom, mm-hmm. and I would turn around and I would see this thing staring and watching. This thing has followed me throughout my entire life, and it still does from time to time, especially if it were on like a more darker or malignant type case or something. It seems like it shows its face. But that was the first times that I can remember, and I kind of graduated, if you will, to seeing full body apparitions, and most generally they were of children. And again, at nighttime, it seemed to only get worse. I'd be alone. That fear response, I think, helped to kind of bring them in more, and they kind of fed off that. But I would see children just in my room, like they were just, playing with my toys, and I would sit there and be like, "What?" I didn't understand it. I couldn't process it. It was just didn't make sense. And I'm like, "What are these people? Why are they here?" And as time had progressed, they started taking form of what I believe now in the ways that they looked when they had passed, whether that be by being hit by a car or being burned in a fire. Like I saw them for what they looked like at their last moments before they crossed. So it was terrifying. It was very gruesome. I started building forts in my bedroom, and I would go through batteries in my flashlights like crazy because I just wanted to see what was there to make sure that no one was really close to me and they weren't touching me, and I kind of had my own little private area in my fort. But I couldn't sleep. I wasn't sleeping at all. And eventually the fortress didn't work out so much, and these things would start crawling in. But the damnedest thing about it was that these things never talked. They never communicated as far as anything I could pick up on when I was a little kid. But they were just there. And, and I think maybe they knew that I could see them, and maybe that's why that they appeared to me. But these things progressed, throughout my life. And I think my mother and my grandmother thought, and they were the ones that raised me, that, Jay will eventually grow out of this stage. But they would always listen to my stories, and they would never say you were crazy. But they did take me to different, psychiatrists to be evaluated. And I would pass these, like I said earlier, and they he just has a crazy imagination. He's just got a huge imagination. And, I would talk to them later and be like, I'm not kidding, guys. This is really happening, and I'm really seeing these things. And my grandmother sometimes would experience some of the same phenomenon that I would experience. So then we started communicating as I got older about it. She would be more open to talk about it. But I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would hear conversations happening in my dining room area at my house. And it would be like a whole bunch of people, like they're having a party, this huge conversation. I would hear it for hours, and it would scare me because I would peek out from underneath the door, and there was nobody there. And then for years, I had this woman that would appear to me. She wore a very light blue gown, and she was almost angelic. And she would just stand at the foot of my bed and just watch me. And she wouldn't say anything, but she almost had a glow to her. So I don't know. I went through so many of these experiences growing up. And then
did you ever talk to your mom and grandma about the woman in the gown?
Yes, I did multiple times, and I explained because the woman actually looked similar to what my mother looked like when she was younger, and I would be like, she looks like this, and this is what she looked like, and they would chatter back and forth, and I never really got a true response that they believed it was somebody. Mm-hmm. But as I gotten older, it almost was almost like a guardian. I felt now that I'm older, looking back at it, that was kind of like someone watching over me, and almost protecting me from all the other stuff, because some of the other stuff was just nasty. Just an article, absolutely terrifying. I think about it sometimes, and it blows my mind that I even turned out the way that I did, going through all the stuff that I went through.
Do you think that maybe that woman might have been a relative, a great grandmother, somebody that might have been close to you family wise?
I wonder if it could be. I've often wondered that. But that's something I definitely should bring up to my living family about that were around during that time and see what they say. I guess I hadn't really revisited that in a while. Actually, it's the first time I think I actually shared this on any interview. I've done a ton of these things, and I think it's the first time I ever mentioned it, so it's the first time I ever got feedback on it. So, yeah, I will have to do that.
Okay.
I'd be interested to know about that actually a little bit further.
I'm sorry, I don't know why that's such a sticking point. It just, to me, it just feels like someone close to you that was watching you. But
I wonder that too. I really do. I absolutely do. Now that I think about it, but it was very peaceful. It was very peaceful, but it was so peaceful that it was almost scary to me for a little bit. But then I would calm down. But I was, and this would happen. Like I had to sleep in my mother's bedroom for a long time because of these things. And that's when that started happening, is this thing appearing. But my biological father, he experienced paranormal phenomenon. My mother saw things when she was younger. My grandmother did. So it's kind of like one of those things where I guess everybody kind of I don't claim to be like a medium or a psychic or anything like that. I don't use these abilities, if you will, on cases. I do feel that I do see a lot more than the average person. I'm very visual. And Marie is very much the ears of what we do. She hears things that where I'm like, are you hearing this like legit, like in this room right now? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, I'm not hearing it, but I'm seeing this thing over here. Do you see it? And then she'll be like, no, I don't see it at all. So I always say I'm the eyes, she's the ears. As a kid, though, it just got worse as I got older. And, it would kind of like, I'd take a break for a couple months. I wouldn't have any of these problems, and then it would reoccur. On August 13th, though, of 1999, I had a near-death experience. And then after that, everything just kind of just went crazy. As far as like the activity and the darkness of everything I was experiencing got much darker, much more malignant, much more just sinister as far as what I was seeing.
Well, tell us a little bit about that near-death experience. How did that day start out? What happened?
Well, this is when I was in high school. I was a senior in high school. I was already starting my senior year, and I was like the big man on campus. Like back then, I was heavy into competitive powerlifting. I think by the time I graduated, I was like a 500-pound bench presser. So that tells you anywhere where I was at size-wise. Yeah. I was really into it back those in the days, and paying for it now. But I was definitely into. So I was expected to be the big man on campus, and you go to these, parties and stuff. With all these jocks, you were, expected to act a certain way, and I got, pushed into a lot of different directions, and by my own choosing, I, got involved with, some of these stupid parties. And one evening I ended up partying a little too hard. And I literally remember sitting back in my car. We were all parked at a lake and this big bonfire and stuff. And I told everyone, I said, I don't feel good. Something's not right. I think I'm just going to go lay down. And I did. And I remember when I sat down in my car to take a nap, is what I thought I was doing. I remember the feeling of a pull from my body. I remember a feeling of a separation, almost like, a locust shedding its skin. I felt like I was just being taken away, and there was this huge pull, and I started to panic. And I'm like, oh my God, like what's happening? And then boom, I remember like opening my eyes back up, and I see everybody around, everyone's having fun and, just joking and laughing and walking around the bonfire. And, it's just this big old thing. Right. Well, it just, I kept pulling in and out, in and out, in and out, until finally I couldn't pull myself back in to myself, I guess you could say, is the only way I could really put it. And I remember seeing my life flash before my eyes, just as you hear many people describe this. It was like I was in a movie theater, and I was the only one there, and I saw my life flash before my eyes. I was shown every happy moment of my entire life, and I was shown all those moments that I thought were terrible, that there was no way I could ever live with this. And I was given a sense of enlightenment to where I was like, those things weren't that bad. Like, those problems weren't that bad. The problem I'm facing right now is permanent. This is a big problem. I was realizing that I was passing. And I remember after that, I had a sensation of falling. Everything went black. And I fell into this dark place. Only way I could describe it as complete absence from God. Complete absence from anything love, light, anything positive. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I really screwed up my life. And how am I as a teenager in this situation when I was raised in the church? Like, how could this have happened to me? And it was the most lonely feeling I ever had in my entire life. And it was this complete darkness, and it was freezing cold. I remember that. And I remember after a while, I was pulled from that area by what appeared to be a man, and I was drugged up. And I'm a big guy at this time. I think at that time I was probably about 275 pounds, fairly solid.
Wow.
For the most part. And this guy was probably 6 foot tall, maybe 140 pounds, soaking wet, long, dirty blonde hair, a red checkered thermal, like plaid type shirt, ripped jeans, boots, a goatee.
Okay.
But I remember looking into his eyes and the darkness that he had in his eyes. There's no word in the English language that can describe the darkness that both has life and death and eternity all at one time. And that's what I was seeing with this guy. But I was brought up this cliff, and there were all these black, dripping, like almost oily things that were just dripping this oily based substance. I don't know what it was. But they were reaching out for me, and he just kept pulling me and pulling me and pulling me. And we got to the top. There was a fire. It wasn't a very large fire, but there was a fire, and there was a boulder on each side. And he set me down on one of the boulders, and he walked to the other side. And I thought, oh my God, is this the devil? You know, like, what is happening? And why am I so terrified? Because in life, I could have taken that guy out in a heartbeat. But where I was at, any of my earthly powers didn't mean anything. And he started drilling me, you know, about, how I was now his. And I remembered the last scene of my life that I saw was in the backyard of my grandmother's house beside an orange tree. And my grandmother had told me, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can part mountains. And I remembered seeing that, the last scene of my life that I saw, like a good moment when I was a little kid. And I screamed out, God, and I could barely get God out. And he yelled back in this loud, demanding voice, which was like, God, there is no God. And I'm like, oh my God, like, this is crazy, you know? So, I mean, this thing, he starts telling me, if there was a God, then why did this happen in your life? If there was a God, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why did this situation happen? You know, why didn't you have a father? Why did your biological father leave you? Why did you end up here if there was a God that loved you? And I screamed out Jesus as loud as I could. And it took everything I had inside me to produce the words, if I have faith the size of a mustard seed, I can part mountains. I said it out loud, as loud as I could. But I was so restricted. And immediately I was thrown from this cliff into this, only way I could describe it was a lake of fire. It was not burning on the side that I was in. I was covered in thicket, thorns, and branches, just covering my entire body. And I'm hearing people screaming in a far off distance. They're saying, you know, God, let me come back for 1 second, 1 minute to tell my friends, my family, my neighbor, whatever. You know, and I'm hearing all these people. I'm hearing people in the far distance where the heat's coming from that are just screaming in terror. And I'm realizing that I have life in death. I have a substance in death. I'm literally, I can tell that there's some type of substance of life that I'm breathing in, which is just a little bit of breath, where it was enough life force, if you will, to sustain my existence and where I was at that moment, but it was miserable. And I remember looking up in the sky of just darkness, and there was one star, and it was the shiniest star in the sky. And I just knew, God, just get me there. Just get me there. And I said to myself internally, I said, God, if you let me come back, if you provide me with an opportunity to come back, you give me the platform, I will tell the people, I will do whatever I can to serve you in any way I possibly can. And I remember at a course of just going through these different trials, at the very end of this, I remember seeing my body in my car, and I tried to sit down in my body, if you will. And this man walked up, and he was wearing some type of light colored gown. It looked like some type of different cloth I've never seen before, to be honest with you. And I saw leather-ish looking sandals, and he grabbed my hand, and I reached out for his hand, and he brought me, wow, feels like it was yesterday. He brought me around to the back of my car, and he said, "Eat this and you will be saved." And I said, "I can't eat that. I'm sick. I can't. Something's wrong. I think I've died." And he forced me to do this essentially. And with my own will, I did. And I vomited all this stuff. But as I was throwing these things up, it wasn't. I saw it visually that when it was going to be like on his feet, and I'm saying, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But his feet were completely clean, as if nothing even happened. And then he asked me to drink this, and I drank. And again, I just regurgitated all this stuff, and I'm apologizing for his feet, and I look at his feet, and they're absolutely clean. And then he grabs my hand, and he says, "Walk with me." And he walked me up to this dirt mound that was separating this fiery place. And on the other side, as I walked up, I saw light. It blinded me. It was so bright. And there was a house. It was a cabin-style house in the middle of the forest, and it had yellow flowers leading all the way up to it, this huge meadow, and there was trees on both sides. And I never saw his face, but I saw his hand, and he went from left to right, and he says, "This is all yours." And I was like, okay, well, at least I'm not where I was before, so this is where I should be. This is where I want to be. Thank God. And immediately I was thrown back into my body. It was daytime. And there was 2 people left from the party sitting by the fire, and they had no clue, and they were freaking out, thinking that something had happened to me. And they were just so messed up out of their minds that they just didn't have it. But everyone else left me. They just left me there for dead. And to make a long story short, it definitely changed every direction in my entire life, and it definitely it pushed me I got into ministry after this had happened. And I kind of got excommunicated from the church because I would listen to stories about people talking about demons, angels, ghosts, and they didn't like that. They didn't, I did small group ministries with like a youth group type thing, and I was working my way up in this whole process, but they didn't like it. So they kind of just little by little prevented me from speaking and being a part of any of the services. And it was shortly thereafter I actually met Marie, and then not too much longer after that we had our own haunting together. And we said, why don't we just form our own ministry, if you will, and it's called Crossing Over Paranormal Society. In the beginning, we were all based of Christians and the same faith, and that's since changed radically. But I don't preach anymore. I don't do any of that. But I remember one day we were at Phoenix Comic-Con, and they gave us a room with 400 seats for a lecture. And I was like, "Oh, Marie, they gave us the wrong room. They usually only give us 150 seats. We fill it up. These are 400 seats." And I'm sitting there at this little podium, and I said, "Marie, if only 20 people show up in here, we're going to pretend like something happened and we have to go." And she's just, okay, that's fine. I don't know why they give this many people. And we actually just appeared on a television show too. And I think people in the paranormal community were very interested in that show that we appeared on. So a whole bunch of people showed up. Well, we had 400 people that showed up, and they were lined up out the door, and they had to have security shut the door off. And I looked over at Marie and I said, "I am scared to death." And she looked at me and she says, "That's your pulpit. Those are your people. You promised God you would tell them that there's life after death. You do what you were told to do." And so I pretty much started my lecture off by bawling like a baby. By the end of the lecture, though, and I kind of gave my story and kind of what led me to where I am as an investigator today, the overwhelming show of support that I had from everybody, and then the local paranormal community, teams that were coming by to bash us and say, "Oh, well, you were on that one show, and you're full of crap." They came up to us and gave us nothing but love, and I was like, wow. And people coming up to "You changed my perception, you changed my way of thinking, and you've opened my mind to new things. Thank you so much." And I was like, wow, okay, I guess I'm still doing this, God. You know what I mean? So to me, the paranormal is much more than just a weekend adventure. It's something that I feel like I'm supposed to be doing, that I'm essentially called to be doing, and that's what I do.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And we've been talking in the previous segment about his near-death experience that he had and how that led him to form the Cops Crew. Jay, the question I posed before the break was this, in that now that you've come out of that experience and you formed your paranormal group and you're out there helping people that are in need of help from these hauntings, are there darker things that are making themselves known to you? And it sounds like there are, but how dark are they? Are they darker than the things that were making themselves known to you before you had that experience? And I guess how much danger are you putting yourself in the process?
Yeah, I would definitely say that things were ramped up after the near-death experience. I take, all kinds of cases, whether it be like a residual type haunting or, an intelligent haunting or, a malignant haunting or whatever. Out of all the years of me doing this, I've only taken 2 demonic cases, and I'm on one, would be my third, I believe to be one, that I'm working on now, which it will affect me. It will affect my family to a point, because it will affect me specifically. It will affect Marie. But it's all part of the process, I guess. I mean, it's what I signed up to do. I can tell you that the second demonic case that we ever took years ago, we used to have Reverend Paul Lovegrove used to be a reverend on our team, and he since passed away this year. Love the man, miss him deeply. He taught me so much, but he was doing a blessing in a home that we believe to be demonic. At the same time and hour that he was performing the blessing in the home of the client's home, my babysitter reported that our bird cage in our bedroom was being slammed violently against the wall. She got so scared that when I returned home to a scared babysitter running out the door, and it was actually my niece. And, we have a really great relationship. And she said, okay, bye, Uncle Jay, bye, Aunt Marie. And she just left. And then she called her mother, which then, came back to calling us and explained what had happened. And as we're talking, we walk into the bedroom, and there's bird seed all over the floor. And there's water on the floor. And everything in the bird cage was flipped upside down. Everything. Bird was unharmed. But everything in the cage was completely flipped upside down. And I thought, oh, my God. This happened at the same time. There's no way that really could have happened. Well, the next morning, we instructed the client to do some things they needed to do, and they were using some different practices to contact the other side, and we asked them to take those materials outside, and we explained to them how to properly dispose of these things, and they were going to do that the next morning. Well, after we left and did the cleansing, they brought all this stuff back in, and they tried to conjure whatever was in the home again. And at that same time and hour, I found out later, I walked into the living room of my house. We had a cleaning day where we were cleaning the house. It was like a Sunday. So it was hey, get everything done, whatever our schedule was that day. And I walked out into the living room, and there was a blood spot the size of a softball on the floor of my living room. I mean, it was soaking wet, noticeably fresh. And I freaked out. I'm looking at my animals, my kids, what's going on? What's happening? Where did this come from? I'm checking everybody, and everything. Everyone's fine. And then we went back to go clean the spot. It had disappeared. And then shortly thereafter, we found a knife in a very unsuspecting area that went missing. And the place we found it just didn't make sense. And we thought, that's really, really weird, because there was a knife on the case the night before, a butcher knife that actually appeared out of nowhere during the case and started moving. And I thought that was, very odd. But flash forward to we were returning back to the house to help this family, because obviously the blessing didn't help. They kind of didn't fulfill their end of the bargain, brought stuff back into the home, continued doing what we had instructed them not to do, and we agreed to come back out there again. That day, Marie and I had never not got an investigation together. She actually ended up falling ill in the afternoon. It progressively got worse towards the evening. I started loading the car for the investigation and cleansing that evening. And what had happened was that the door kept locking behind me. Well, I thought she was mad and stuff, because I was still intending on going. She wasn't feeling well. And long story short, I ended up grabbing one last bit of equipment in the closet in our bedroom. And as I was walking out, I had 250 business cards sitting on my desk. I literally saw them get lifted up and thrown across the room. And I was floored. I'm like, I cannot believe I just saw that. I mean, I've seen levitation a handful of times to that point, and I was like, wow. I literally saw him stand up, like literally lift up, right up, and just floating right there, and then thrown. As soon as I walked out of the room, it sounded like bowling balls hitting our ceiling. Boom, 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 boom. And we lived in a condo at the time, so we're like, okay, someone's obviously doing maintenance on this place. Like, let's go out there and look, and maybe someone, and nobody. And then I walked back in the house, and I heard what almost sounded like an ovulus, like the voice from an ovulus.
Yep.
And it was a male voice, and it was like it was traveling all the way around the house, and it was just talking. And I was like, what in the hell is going on? This is insane. So I call Reverend Lovegrove, and I say, hey, this is going on in my house. Like, the thing's not at the guy's house. It's at my house right now. Something's going on. Like, I don't know. The thing's trying to prevent me from going. Like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, I gave you the holy water, and he's trying to tell me what to do. About that time, Marie walked into the bedroom, and she screamed as loud as she could and got right in my face. And she was showing her teeth. She started talking like a man. It was a man's voice coming from her actual voice.
Oh, weird.
And I was like, oh my God. And I start praying like Jesus, something. I don't even know what I was even saying. And she's like, Jesus. And it reminded me of my near-death experience. It was the same scenario. And I'm like, oh my God, what did we get ourselves into? And not even knowing what to do, and I didn't know what the whole process or whatever the preacher was trying to tell me to do. I had probably a whole liter of this holy water that was blessed. I dumped it over Marie's head, just dumped the whole damn thing on her. And she fell down onto the bed. And within about 3 seconds, she woke up and she said, where did this water come from? Why did you get me wet? And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You did not know what just now happened? Like, are you telling me? Like, I'm like, you don't, and I was just floored. And she's like, I don't know what in the hell you're talking about, but you throwing water on me, really? Like, what is that all about? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, you even know what just happened? She had no idea, know? So, I mean, she we had to go through a process with that. So to say, yes, did it affect me in my home? That's a very long answer to the question, but that's an example of one time when it did. And it got so bad to where we almost were driven away from the paranormal community from that particular case.
I'm curious, Jay, as I sit and I listen to the experience and experiences that you've had, I told you I was going to tie this into an experience of my own and some things that I've been going through on my own here as of late, and some stuff that I've shared with the audience over the last couple of weeks. And Dave and I have kind of gone round and round over the last couple of years about generational curses, and he doesn't seem to believe in them.
Right.
Whereas I have kind of an interesting background, and I'll share it with you briefly. It's a recap for our audience, so I'll make it short.
Okay.
My 17th great grandfather was the 4th Grand Master of the Knights Templar.
Oh wow!
So there's in short story, even shorter. There's mutual friends that believe that I may have some sort of a generational curse and I know a lot of people roll their eyes because I have the weirdest things that happen at different times. And some people say, oh yeah, just bad luck, or, oh yeah, it's just, you've got things that you just trip yourself up. But I've had some unusual things happen in the house I'm in, that could be attributed to a spirit or a ghost.
Right.
Just things that, and one of the things that happened here in my house, and I went over it on one show recently. I have a memory box, or it's like a shadow box or a memory box that has my grandfather's obituary and a shell casing from his funeral, and a couple of patches from Army and Navy and things. And I was about to put his picture in it. And it hangs right by the pool table in my basement, right outside my studio. And I have a picture of him here in my studio, the studio that I'm sitting in right now talking to you in. And the memory box is just outside my studio. And one night I'm upstairs. The studio's in the basement, and the basement's finished. And I'm upstairs, and I'm watching TV one night, and all of a sudden I hear crash, like, not just glass breaking, but like somebody slammed something down on the floor.
Right.
pretty alarming because it's just myself and one other person in the house. So I walk downstairs, and typically in the house, I will hear, even if it's just me in the house, I will hear, I have an attached garage, an attached two-car garage in what's a Rambler. Essentially, it's a finished Rambler. I'll hear somebody come through the door of the garage downstairs, and there won't be anybody here. Or I'll hear somebody walking around downstairs, and there won't be anybody here. So pretty unusual stuff. But as an investigator, you don't get creeped out by it. You just think, oh, that's unusual.
Right.
It's the jaded part.
Guys, right?
Yeah, right. Other times there's how you have the curtain rods that kind of the new ones that kind of you unscrew to fit into a space in the windowsill. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've got those in the windowsills downstairs. Well, one of them has been screwed in really tight downstairs. That's been ripped down more than once and thrown to the ground. Okay. Not just dropped out of the window, but thrown to the ground and away from the window, which is weird. But in this case, the memory box got ripped off the wall and thrown between. I have a picture of it too. I could actually send it to you if you actually wanted to see it.
Absolutely.
Thrown off the wall, and it was between the pool table and the wall. So about a good 1.5 feet, 2 feet between the pool table and the wall. But the nails were still in the wall. And it looks violent. It looks like somebody picked it up off the wall and smashed it on the floor because the frame of the shadow box, which is quite thick, I got it from a framing store, is broken. It's shattered.
Oh, wow.
So like somebody angrily took it off the wall and smashed it. And I thought, okay, this is just messed up. So the first thing when I see it on the floor is I go running to the door of the garage to see if maybe somebody broke in. That's the first.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, that's the first thing I look for. So I go to check the door. Then I walked around where it was actually smashed, and I go to check the window to see if anybody broke in the window. Because that's the first thing I'm thinking is, was somebody actually in here?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I checked those two spots. Nobody had broken in. Then I checked the wall to make sure that the nails are still attached because maybe it fell off the wall. The nails are still there.
What? Wow.
Yeah. So, and they're firmly in their place because I pull on the nails to make sure the nails are still intact. The nails are still intact. Here's the thing, Jay. At this point, now I'm not cowering in the corner pissing myself or anything like that. But I'm a little unnerved. I'm thinking, at this point, okay, that's a little creepy. So,
right.
Then at this point, being as blessed as we are, we have friends in the field that we can call and talk to. And, you're like, well, what the hell's going on? I start trying to surmise different things as to what's going on. And at first I'm thinking, okay, well, I happen to have a package of salts and in holy water and some other in metals and some other things that I got from an exorcist friend of ours who sent it to us. And I happen to put in my studio, I have a closet that happens to have, tell me this doesn't make you cringe a little bit. It has, it's got doors, but the doors are mirrored. Okay. And in the closet, there's a shelf, and I just happened to, I transferred it into the closet and I threw it up in there on the top shelf. Well, this is when all this activity started to happen. I thought, well, what if I happen to close a portal with all this stuff?
Oh, wow.
And maybe I pissed something off and I closed the portal. I thought,
right.
And that was the first thing I thought of. I don't know. That was just instinct. And I thought, well, maybe I should take it out of there. Well,
right.
So then I contacted a friend, and they said, well, that might not necessarily be the case. Why don't you try this? So I tried something else. So I'm trying to kind of feel my way through it. So I'm kind of taking the long way around this to ask you this question. with everything that has happened to you from an early age, even the age of 4, because I find this interesting, do you feel like the hauntings that have happened to you have happened to you because maybe you do have that psychic sensitive side to you, or have they happened to you because maybe this is a generational haunting or a generational curse? Is this a haunting that maybe has happened to you because of sins of the father, so to speak, or maybe your family has been haunted from generation to generation, or maybe it's something where you've been haunted from past life to past life?
Yeah, that's a really question that I ask myself actually a lot. I feel like, it's possibly it could be a generational type thing. Oftentimes I wonder if it's more of a curse than it is a blessing, So, I mean, when we go through stuff, when it's really difficult, and we've been through some of those darker type hauntings in our own home, it's like, wow, this is a curse, but when we make it through it, it's like, oh, it's a blessing. Now we can go tell people the story, and it'd be a living testament that they can go through it themselves and they can make it to the other side without, being unscathed. But I hate to venture into the thought saying that, oh, well, I'm some type of psychic and I can see the other side. Maybe that is the case, and maybe I'm just not willing to accept that. I think the word psychic is thrown around too loosely in the community and outside the community. So for me to have that label, I feel uncomfortable with it, just because there's error in humans. We make mistakes, and maybe, things aren't always what we appear them to be. And I'd hate to mislead someone based upon me going into a location as a psychic. So for that term, it would be difficult for me to use that.
Okay.
But I definitely, because I'm hearing so many stories from my own family and generational, and this is like my whole family going back as far back as, anyone's alive to tell me, they've all had paranormal experiences. So I wonder if it just wasn't passed down to me. It would be different if, after my near-death experience, these things started to happen. Then I think it's tied to that, saying, well, I had this profound, experience in my life and experienced death, so that's why this has happened. That's not the case. So me living this stuff all the way since I was like so young, I have to venture to say that it was passed down as either a gift or a curse, if you will. But I've managed to take that curse, if you will, and make it a blessing to others. So, that's all I can do with it. I can't get rid of it. So, I mean, why not go out and do that? And that's, no shortage of stories and experiences. That's why we end up doing so much television, because we just have so much content. Just it's so ongoing. I even just talking to you on the phone, I opened up all these different memories of things that I've gone through, and like, wow, I've never shared that story, but I'd have to venture to say a curse that I'm trying to turn into a blessing.
And that's a good way to look at it. I guess the reason I bring that up is because it hits me as I'm talking to you that I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. It's a blessing to be able to put it out there that you had that near-death experience and that you were saved by God, but then here comes evil one more time, but then God's there to wipe it away, but then evil comes by one more time. It just, it's this cyclical thing that keeps happening.
It's nonstop. I believe in like interdimensionalism, if you will, that's what I dub it at least. It's like, I believe that there's angels, demons, and apparitions, if you will, passing us at all times. Sometimes we're lucky enough or unfortunate enough to see them, or catch a glimpse of them. I think that I'm a little bit more tuned into it. And the more, people that do paranormal investigations, you become more tuned in to that anyways. So the more you surround yourself with it, you kind of pick up on things that the average person wouldn't even have any idea what's going on. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
I guess too, there are people that are stronger that can deal with the everyday, let's just say tricks that demons play, or tricks that right. lower level entities can play on you.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and it's kind of funny because you can mention it with a wink, nod, and a laugh, the different things that happen around the house that other people would be driven insane by. Blood spots on the floor.
And it almost did. I mean, to be honest with you, like we did this short documentary called Trials and Tribulations of the Demonic. It was, it's not the most well done thing in the world, but we put together, and it's quite informational about like as far as like what we went through. But it literally, Marie and I were about ready to just walk. Marie actually left the fields for about 6 months, and she didn't want anything to do with it because it had gotten so dark. But when she realized that didn't really help, it was almost like some of these lower levels or these demons or whatnot, or spirits, or all of them, were almost trying to push us away from seeking truth, because our whole mission statement is to seek truth, understanding, and proof of the paranormal by any means necessary. And what that means is we allow ourselves essentially to live haunted, and we don't try to cast it out. We don't try to hide from it. We just take the bull by its horns, if you will, and just push forward. And oftentimes that leads to, great breakthroughs for clients trying to get information, or sometimes some serious trials and tribulations for us. But it's weird. It's weird what drives us. It's strange. And people hear our stories and they're like, oh my God, you guys are either crazy or you're lying. And, for the skeptics, all I have to say for them, I'm not in the field for the skeptics. I'm in it for the family that's scared to talk to anybody and they got stuff going on and they don't know who to turn to. That's who I'm in the field for. So if you watch our shows and the episodes we've done and different various programs and you don't believe us, that's fine. It's not for you. If it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't believe it either, to be completely honest with you. I really wouldn't, because some of these stories, they're unbelievable, and I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't seen it myself and lived through it.
Somebody had asked me this question probably about 2 years ago, and I gave them an honest answer. I'm going to ask you the same question, Jay, and that's this. For a family that's haunted, the average family that's haunted, or the average person that's haunted or going through a haunting, is there truly a finite resolution to a haunting?
No, there is no. There's because we don't understand. It's still the unknown. We don't have any. We assume spirits are made up of energy, and we assume that they're talking to us through our K2 meters and our ITC technology. And there's a lot of assumption, and unless you have data to back that and continue. I mean, that's why we assume that these things are talking to us through K2s or EMF or and whatnot. But there's no solid way of getting rid of it. Some of these things were here before we were even born, and they'll be here long after. So for us to feel this empowerment to where we can just get rid of them and banish them, do I think it's possible? I mean, I've seen some work that some people do. I work with some people that I've seen do amazing things, and I don't second guess their authenticity at all. But from the stuff that I've dealt with, it's hard for me to say that there's not a bulletproof way to getting rid of any of this, because the reality, most what we find on cases are that you take in residential cases, for example, because that's where you usually find, the bad stuff, right? For us, at least, it's the same story. There's domestic violence or something. There's abuse. There's substance abuse. There's adultery. There's arguing. There's just all these things, these factors. So when we come into these locations, we make it a point to explain to them, that they're kind of feeding it. So we call them self-generated hauntings. I guess people would call it poltergeist or whatever. But that you're essentially producing your own nightmare. You're creating all this negative energy within your own home by doing all these negative things that you're doing. If you want to lower the level of activity, lower your level of, I hate to say the word sin, but I guess sin, right, in your home, or evil doing or whatnot, right? And you will see a decrease in activity in your home. But until you start making changes on a personal level, you'll never, ever be able to solve the actual haunting. I talked with, and Marie was actually, I got into the end of the conversation, she was talking to Grant Wilson. Love the guy, great guy, amazing. And we were talking just that to him. And he had mentioned that what he used to do is he used to take clients out of their home and he would take them out to the mall. And he'd say, hey, does it feel differently at the mall than it does at your home? And then he would, kind of explain to them, sometimes you just got to take, you just got to get out of your house and get away from it and just release, right? Because sometimes we just, we become hermits to our home and we just sit there and binge watch Netflix and never really want to leave. And then there's arguments and there's, unpaid bills and all the life stuff that happens. And I mean, these things they feed off of it. The other side does, and they'll take it. And if you're putting out anger into the atmosphere and hate and, lust or these things, they sense it. And you're like a beacon to the supernatural a little bit. They'll come to you like a magnet. So the way that the lessen the level of activity is to really stop doing that stuff. And if you're going to argue, take it outside the house. Go to a park. Go for a drive somewhere. Sit down, have some coffee, and then hash out some type of argument that you might have. Don't do it inside the confines of your home, because there's always a danger of you inviting things into your home unwillingly necessarily, So that's our take on it, at least.
It's a good take to have. For people who are in need, you're in Arizona, correct?
We're in Arizona. We're based out of Phoenix.
You are. But do you mainly help people in Arizona, or do you travel?
We have traveled. We go to a lot of conventions, so sometimes we might set up an investigation at a place that we're already going to be at or something if we have time. But we will travel, traveled into California, Nevada, New Mexico, and places surrounding us. So, yeah, we definitely don't have a problem traveling. We don't have a problem taking cases. And we still do that despite all the other stuff we're doing. So
okay. And the cops crew mainly investigates in Arizona, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And for people who are looking for help from the cops crew, they can contact you through thecopscrew.com, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. I tell you what, Jay, I think we should probably leave it here. Let's leave it at this point. And I want to have you back. And we can talk more about different cases on another time, because I tell you, my friend, it is fascinating. But I want to leave it at this point right here with this program, because there was so much to unpack with this program. But there's, I think, more to talk about. Just with the cops crew, I want to do just a program on the cops crew and the different cases that you've encountered with the cops crew for a different program, because there's so much more. And I want to have Marie back on as well, and have the two of you talk about some of the different cases that you've done there as well. Jay, I want to thank you very much for coming on today, and it's been an exciting program, a great program, and a pleasure talking with you, my friend.
Oh, likewise. We look forward to it. Thank you for having us on.
And thank you for being on. Folks, again, Dave will be back next weekend on Beyond the Darkness. He'll be on tomorrow on Midnight in the Desert, so you have that to look forward to. And I want to thank everybody for putting up with me on Midnight in the Desert this past week. And thank you for joining me the last few weekends on Beyond the Darkness. And thank you very much for your continued support on both programs and on True Crime Tuesday. And of course, if you, I want to remind you about the contest we have going on True Crime Tuesday. Of course, if you continue to sign up and stay with us through December, or actually through January, beginning of January of 2019, you are eligible to win $500 of our money. That's right. Stay signed up through January, and you are eligible to win $500 of my hard-earned money. It's my 401k. It's all I have from 25 years in radio. That's it. $500. But it's all yours. You can have it if you stay signed up. You just go to darknessradio.com, get yourself signed up, and enjoy all the archives that are there. There are over 75 shows for you to enjoy of True Crime Tuesday. Of course, you get not only the hard-hitting interviews on True Crime Tuesday, but you also get Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals and I Knew a Murderer, the different features there on True Crime Tuesday as well. We encourage you to go over there and sign up. It's just $5 a month. You get a brand new show every Tuesday, and we want you to go check that out as well. For Dave Schrader, I'm Tim Dennis. Be sure to join us again next Saturday for a brand new edition of Supernatural News and Parashare. I want to remind you as well to call in, get your stories in for Parashare, 651-300-4977. That number, that Google Voice number, is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 651-300-4977, and we'll take your phone calls next Saturday for Parashare. Again, 651-300-4977. Looking forward to hearing your individual paranormal stories. Be sure to share them with us for next Saturday. For Dave Schrader, I'm Tim Dennis. We'll see you next Saturday for Supernatural News and Parashare. You've been listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.